Johnny was the kind of average American teenager who could recite the Pokédex entries of his favorite legendaries faster than he could do his algebra homework. On a rainy Saturday, he settled onto the couch with a bowl of cereal and the biggest grin when Name That Legendary flickered across the TV. The show was loud, silly, and a little nostalgic. It was exactly what Johnny needed. Between rounds, an ad rolled. It was for a shiny new Pokémon cereal coming out in a few weeks called Legendary Loopies. The box was an explosion of color, rimmed with tiny Pokeball-shaped loops and pictures of Reshiram, Zekrom, Lugia, and other towering legendary figures grinning like mascots. The voiceover promised flavors in every bite and a collectible spoon. Johnny didn't think twice. He pre-ordered the limited early access box almost instantly on his phone because, honestly, who could resist the orange creamsicle loop? Johnny had been waiting for weeks. The send-off email still glowed on his laptop screen, reading early access. Legendary Loopies will arrive first to our earliest fans. And he grinned every time he thought about the surprise collectible Pokemon theme spoon that, according to rumors and leaks, apparently came with the box. That night, he watched Name That Legendary twice, then 3 times, practicing answers he never quite remembered out loud while leaning forward on his knees. When the cereal arrived in the afternoon, which was a bright box covered in glossy art of Reshiram, Zekrom, Lugia, and other cool legends, Johnny could barely keep his hands off it. He put the box on the counter, snapped a picture for his future cereal collection, and hid it in the cupboard like it was treasure. The next morning, sitting at the kitchen table in his pajamas, Johnny poured a bowl of Legendary Loopies and found them delightfully poppy, fruity, and surprisingly, with the orange creamsicle pieces tasting just like summer. He used the included spoon, which had a tiny Reshiram silhouette on the handle, and licked milk from the corners of his lips between bites. It felt like a special secret, like he'd unlocked an extra level in childhood. That night, he went to bed thinking about rare candies and naming all the legendaries he had seen on TV. A few days later, while the adult world hummed along oblivious, Johnny's world began to shift before his eyes. At first, the changes were small and awkward. Midway through a history study session one night, Johnny had suddenly scarfed down an entire family-sized pizza and still tinkered in the kitchen for snacks, only to feel normal again 5 minutes later. He shrugged the first time off as stress eating. Then, at odd hours at night, he found himself booting up his old Nintendo DS and spending hours in Pokémon Black and White, lingering at the screen whenever Reshiram appeared. It felt like a warm nostalgia tug, but deeper. It was as if his attention was being pulled toward one particular figure on the screen. Soon physical signs crept in too. At first, it was tiny flecks, a faint fuzz along Johnny's forearms that looked like someone had brushed flour across his skin. Over the next hours, the white fuzz thickened, soft and solid like the beginnings of a snow-dusted coat. Then his voice, when he practiced trivia into his phone, sometimes came out with an odd, musical trill, which was more like a calling sound rather than a sentence. He laughed it off as stress or a sugar high. That night, he set his toothbrush on the sink, yawning, and fell asleep as a teenager should, until morning. The next day, morning light spilled across his bedroom. Johnny yawned and rolled over. He felt larger, heavier, and somehow fuller around the chest and shoulders before he opened his eyes. When he finally woke up, groggily stumbled to the bathroom and reached for his toothbrush. His fingers awkwardly fumbled the handle. Claws, not fingers, wrapped around the plastic handle of his toothbrush. The skin on his knuckles was furry and white. Panic rose fast and hot. Although he didn't want to, Johnny forced himself to look into the mirror, and his jaw just about hit the floor when he saw what looked back at him. Where a teenage boy should have stared back was a majestic, white-furred, blue-eyed form. Sleek, feathered wings folded behind shoulders that were broad, not menacing, but impossibly grand for a human frame. His face had the soft, streamlined beak and noble curve of a dragon, and his mouth opened not with words, but with a long, rolling cry that vibrated the glass. For a second, Johnny tried to speak. What? I'm Reshiram? A legendary? No way. This has to be a dream, right? I'm sure I'm still asleep. This must just be a bad dream. I know I'll wake up any moment now. This just can't be real. To himself, he sounded like his old voice in his head, but to the world, he came out in legendary calls and chromatic hums. Johnny pinched himself until he felt the sting. He wasn't dreaming. He was very awake and had inexplicably transformed into a Reshiram. For a moment, terror was a cold thing in his chest, and then curiosity prickled right next to it. Before Johnny could process anything, the front door burst open. Several kids from school filed in, laughing. One was clutching a phone with an excited glow. Yo, our Poke radar lit up, and the app is showing a Reshiram right here. One squealed. Dude, we can capture it. Another bellowed, already fishing a Master Ball from a pocket like it was the most casual thing on a Saturday morning. Johnny flapped his arms, awkward, powerful, and unfamiliar, and tried to speak. He attempted to shout, wait. Stop. It's me, Johnny. But the only reply was an alarmed, majestic howl. By the time he processed their intent, a Master Ball was already arcing his way. To Johnny's friends from school, he wasn't Johnny anymore. He was a once-in-a-generation capture opportunity. Johnny made a run for it, and panic shoved him into motion. He barreled past them, knocking into a table, skidding through the living room while avoiding the thrown Master Balls, and the chaos Johnny's elbow smashed into his TV. The screen splintered into a spiderweb of black and white cracks. For a wild second, he watched his favorite show splinter into static and felt a bizarre weightlessness. Like an actor who suddenly realizes the audience is watching him and wants to write the next line for him. He crawled away from the ruined television, breathing heavy breaths that sounded like distant thunder. Being a legendary and trying not to get captured is very different from any late-night Pokemon battle Johnny had ever imagined. People screamed, phones recorded, and almost everyone who glimpsed him shouted, "There's a Reshiram! Capture it!" Pokeballs flew like confetti, pelting his flanks, thunking harmlessly off feathers, and failing with dramatic whines. Each near capture sent kids and trainers into a chorus of groans. Johnny learned fast. Being a legendary was exhilarating in cinematic ways and terrifying in practical ones. Every phone camera ping made his heart drop. People shouted strategies. Kids wept with excitement. Adults shouted orders. Johnny discovered how chaotic it was to duck through a movie theater. The velvet ropes snapped under his wingspan, and popcorn rained down like an embarrassed cloud. At one point, a teenage girl in a cosplay Misty jacket tried to hand him a sandwich. "Please take this," she said. Johnny, now Johnny the Reshiram, attempted an appreciative chirp and took the sandwich in an awkward claw. But upon trying to eat it, he found the bread tasted like cardboard and spit it out. He missed pizza. He missed toast. And most of all, he missed the simple smell of breakfast and a normal life that was now seemingly gone. When police sirens wove into the chaos, Johnny bolted, his heart hammering, fur brushing stone. The police arrived across the street with sirens yawning in the evening. He braced. The world felt smaller and more dangerous. He flattened his vast, feathered body against brick and hid in an alley, panting in a chorus of purrs and vocal trills, with breaths that felt like gusts, heart pounding in his new massive chest. Then a voice in the alley, soft, measured, and very far from panic, called, "Hey, over here. You'll be safe with us, I promise." The door that opened in the alley was a small, unexpectedly ordinary door. Inside, the lights clicked on and revealed two figures that made Johnny forget about fear for a beat. Lugia and Zekrom. Lugia was the first to move. She appeared like a living white gale, a smooth, silvery body shaped like a graceful sea creature with broad, wing-like fins that shimmered with faint blue underglow. Her eyes were calm and ocean-deep, and when she tilted her head, Johnny felt the faint scent of salt and storm. Zekrom contrasted like thunder. Broad-shouldered, matte black scales, electric coils along his spine that hummed with restrained energy. His eyes were sharp, charismatic, and bright as lightning. Where Johnny the Reshiram was graceful flame and white velvet, Zekrom was compact storm and taut muscle. For the first time since he'd transformed, Johnny felt understood. Their presence felt like standing between a storm and a calm ocean. Lugia's wings folded carefully as she spoke in a calm, human voice the way people do when they don't want to startle a child. "We've been monitoring the broadcast," she said. "You were the first. You're confused and scared. That's normal." Johnny responded, "What do you mean, the first? What on earth are you talking about? And why can I understand what you're saying?" He was stunned and strangely relieved. With them, his cries translated into clear words they could hear. "People hear our voices as cries," Lugia explained in a soft, human-like voice. "But to each other, we speak plainly. Your inside voice, speaks like a boy. Outside you cry like a legend." Lugia explained something that had seemed impossible. Pokemon can understand each other like beings of the same language, while humans interpret their cries as strange noises. But within their own kind, speech is clear. To Johnny, that meant that under the feathers and scales, there was a bridge between the human he knew and the legend that he had become. Johnny gaped, then laughed, a sound like a halftime whistle that surprised him. Through them, he could explain the panic outside. They told him they'd been tracking a food company called Team Galactic Foods for weeks and had seen worrying signs. Zekrom's voice was a low rumble, skeptical and sharp. "Johnny, we noticed the early order badges. Whoever made the cereal you purchased wanted to transform people. That's not natural." Lugia's soft eyes met Johnny the Reshiram. "We believe the cereal you ate carried an experimental transformation reagent. It seems that someone wants to mass produce it." She outlined a plan. "We need the rest of your cereal box. There might just be a clue inside." That night, they snuck back to Johnny's house. Johnny's friends from school camped on the lawn, master balls lined up like horrifying lanterns. Lugia, Zekrom, and Johnny moved fast. Lugia's fins folding inward, Zekrom's black bulk distracting a patrol, and Johnny sneaking into his house to retrieve the cereal box. In Johnny's kitchen cabinet, they found a half-eaten Legendary Loopies box, took it, and quickly returned back to the house in the alley, the trio's small and humble base of operations. Lugia rifled gently through the inner flaps and lifted a shiny square of print. "A QR code," she murmured, scanning it with her Poképhone 25, a sleek device carried by Legendaries, which were to life. The code revealed a private page on the screen for Team Galactic Foods. The site's backend, secured but not invincible, spilled data that made Lugia's feathers ruffle. In dry, corporate prose lay a plan. Mass distribute a serial prototype designed to induce transformations in children, coding the changed minds to respond to a central control node. Team Galactic Foods, thinly veiled under the friendly brand, intended to engineer a generation of young legendaries who would obey and enact a grab for control in an evil nationwide takeover scheme. Johnny felt used. The early access box was a mistake in the company's rollout, the site claimed. An 8B experiment. The one Johnny had consumed lacked the final mind control implant by accident, which was why his mind had remained his own even through the overwhelming change. Lugia's eyes hardened and her mouth tightened. "They want to control and convert kids all over the country, which in legendary forms would give adults little resistance to them," she said. "You were transformed, but not controlled because your batch was a mistake. We cannot allow this to continue." Johnny's anger burned hotter than his new feathers, and he slammed his claws on the ground in rage. He had been a test case, turned into something majestic, and then hunted like an amusement. He wanted to shout, to call the company out in every forum and on every screen. Instead, he steadied, listening as Lugia and Zekrom started working on a plan to stop Team Galactic Foods before the cereal shipped nationwide. They told Johnny the plan would take a few days to fully figure out, so Lugia and Zekrom told Johnny to stay low profile during that time and return to the alley once they had come up with something. Johnny left, still angry, but a little calmer now that he knew the big truth, and tried to live a normal life like he had before the transformation, at least for a little while, although it was strange, awkward, difficult, and even a little funny being a legendary Reshiram after all. This is what he did during the next few days while he was waiting, with Zekrom handing Johnny his very own Poképhone 25 right before he left so they could keep in touch during that time and keep him up to date on the latest news. Human food refused Johnny the Reshiram. What had tasted like delicious pizza before now tasted like cardboard dough and stale plastic, and there was no way he was going to eat that. A fast food run became a diplomatic mission when the drive-thru attendant attempted to hand him a Happy Meal through the window, as Johnny still had an urge to eat fast food, despite his new form. He swooped the Happy Meal away like a snack-sized offering, but found the meal tasted like eating trash to him, which made him cry. The only things he could stomach were strange Pokemon gifts Lugia had cooked up for him, such as a glowing rare candy that felt like warmth in his belly, and a stew that smelled faintly of an ocean breeze and toasted marshmallow. He learned fast that being a legendary comes with very refined and inconvenient taste buds. Johnny also learned that Halloween costumes and cosplay groups could look terrifyingly similar to real threats. A local con swarmed the streets with people in elaborate Pokemon suits. He hid inside a storage crate and rode a parade float for 20 freaked-out minutes before sneaking away. Another time, Johnny curled in a row of recliners in a movie theater while trying to watch a new film called Five Nights at Freddy's 3 and got an entire small child's worth of candy flung at him by mistake. A security guard whispered sympathetically, "We thought you were an animatronic stunt." Johnny felt a weird kinship with the popcorn machine. When trying to return to his school one day, a swarm of kids outside the school grounds tried a coordinated ambush on Johnny, forming a chain to throw their Pokeballs with synchronized fervor. Johnny dodged gracefully, then mistakenly stepped on a kid's skateboard. The skateboard and the owner survived. Johnny explained by making a short, awkward series of friendly chirps. The owner hugged his knee like it was the most normal thing in the world. He then remembered his broken TV he had smashed at his house by accident when the transformation had first occurred, and he had to make a run for it. After finding and disposing of the smashed TV in the living room of his house that night, he had to go to the store and buy a new TV. Walking into the electronics store as a Reshiram drew attention, but not the capture frenzy. Maybe it was the late hour, or the employees' careful professionalism, or the fact that the store staff were trained to keep their calm when unusual customers arrived. People watched with curiosity, phones raised but not quite hostile. Johnny kept his head bowed and his feathered shoulders hunched. He picked a big smart TV, bigger than before, so the crack in the living room would be a memory. The cashier kept his cool and even offered a friendly chat about warranties. Johnny said nothing, answering only with small nods. A short while later, and back in the living room, setting the new screen in place, Johnny's reflection shimmered in its glossy black. He watched the first few minutes of a new episode of Name That Legendary on the new machine, and then switched it off and slept in his bed, now several sizes too small. The next day, Johnny's attempt at normalcy became comical when he tried to jump on his old Wii balance board after hooking it up to the new TV to keep active as Johnny the Reshiram. The software screamed, "Please enter user statistics," and then politely labeled him, oh, that's obese, in a flashing warning when he stepped on because the game's sensors were not built to handle a Legendary's mass and size. It said he weighed 2,025 pounds and 9 feet in size, and the game's comment made him feel larger than ever, but not in a good way. After an awkward and lonely session of modding the balance board with strings and duct tape, he finally got his profile to register, and then carefully played through Wii Fit Sports Resort in a crouch between wing beats while holding what was, to him, a small Wii remote while standing on the balance board. He laughed at himself afterward, thinking about how funny it was to make a game treat him like a human again, and also because it meant he still had a little ingenuity left. Then, on the roof of a grocery store, Lugia taught him how to ride wind currents gently. He learned the exciting feeling of stretching his wings and flying around, even if just for a short time, which was an amazing joy and wonder. Then, hiding on his roof at dawn, Johnny watched the sun curl over rooftops and realized he'd learned a new appreciation for quiet. Reshiram's majesty had taught him to respect small moments, like the steam of coffee on a kitchen counter, The way a friend's laugh tumbled open, and the honesty and kindness of a wing that tucks you warmer than your heaviest blanket. A few days later, Johnny got a text message on his Poképhone 25 that said Lugia and Zekrom had finished the plan and needed him back at the alley house so they could discuss it together, and Johnny quickly flew there and entered the small house in the alley where his allies were waiting. The plan felt fragile and immediate. Infiltrate the plant, find the production line, and destroy the machines. While Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom mapped a nighttime route, footsteps sounded at the door. A figure slipped into the lamplit room in a coat oddly like a scientist's lab coat and oddly like a fan-made uniform, all at once. Calm, thin, and impossibly composed. He introduced himself as N. N's voice was soft, precise, and oddly sincere. "You meddle in affairs you do not understand," he said, smiling with a confidence that had no trace of humor. "Team Galactic's goal is not merely profit. We believe transformation can create a new balance. Children, turned into legendaries, would reshape society. You may applaud the result, but the means are decisive." Lugia bristled. Zekrom's plates sparked darkly. Johnny the Reshiram, trembling his chest, felt small. "But why use kids? What's wrong with you?" he cried and then yelled, human words folding into raspy, angry calls, and walked close enough that Johnny could see the meticulous calm on his face. "Because children are beginnings. They are malleable, just like you. They will lead the change we need before the older minds can resist. Why wait for consent when you can create compliance?" When Johnny jumped forward, an instinctive, furious leap, N barely flinched. With a few whispered words, N triggered an alarm that echoed like a bell in a cave. Team Galactic security closed in, and the trio had to move now or lose the chance. They flew into the night under cover of fog and concrete. Zekrom peeled open a back conduit with a bolt of controlled lightning. Lugia blew a gale that sent alarms scrambling and dampened vibrations. Johnny felt the raw exhilaration of power, but also the sobering knowledge that he could not return to the life he loved until this was over. They stormed the production plant in a barrage of feathers, scales, and roars. Conveyors of finished cereal spun, boxes stamped with the Team Galactic Foods logo rolled like a torrent, and rows of canisters hissed with powders that smelled faintly citrusy and metallic. Machines purred with a purpose that made Johnny's teeth ache. The fight was close, and, moved like a strategist in a war, he had written the rules for, commanding robots and security units, as if directing an orchestra. Zekrom seized a control panel with a surge of electricity and ripped wiring free as if pulling a tooth. Lugia created a gust that made the cameras weep mist. Johnny breathed a controlled flare that singed conveyors and melted circuitry without starting an inferno that would endanger innocent workers still trapped in the complex. It was terrifying to have that level of force in his limbs and not know the measure of it. In the end, they smashed vats, scattered crates of cereal, and shut down the mind control core, a machine of blinking lights and looping code that had the quiet smell of antiseptic, and escaped in a sleek jet, flipping the plant's security camera off with a final, chilling line as he soared away. "You have delayed us. You cannot defeat progress. There will be more opportunities." Johnny felt hollow for a moment. They had stopped the distribution, but he remained in Reshiram form. The destruction felt righteous yet incomplete. Johnny, Zekrom, and Lugia returned to Johnny's house under a sky rinsed clean by fight weather. Zekrom and Lugia were weary but steady. They explained gently to Johnny that the mind control element had been part of a central module inside the plant. Without it, the transformation reagent would no longer be produced. Unfortunately, there was nothing in the plant to reverse a transformation that had already occurred, which made Johnny feel horrible. Johnny sat on his porch steps and felt the weight of that sentence, while staring up at the constellations as if they might offer an answer, but they did not. Before leaving, Zekrom and Lugia did something unexpected. They stepped toward Johnny's old Nintendo DS, the cartridge of Pokémon Black and White still inside. With a strange look and flash of energy, They folded themselves, not into anything violent, but into a quiet form, and slipped back into the game. "How did you do that?" Johnny managed, whispering to a console he'd won as consolation prize in a tournament 3 years ago. Luigi's voice came faint, the way distant waves sound. "We have our ways. You found us because we were watching you." They left with a promise of watching out for the future. "If N comes back," Zekrom rumbled, "we'll be near." That night, Johnny the Reshiram tried to sleep and found himself missing the simple things. Human hands, the weight of a backpack, and the embarrassment of school hallways. Exhausted, scared, and raw with feeling, Johnny laid down in his bed and let the enormity of the hours wash through him like rainwater through a gutter. He cried a waterfall of tears, not with the wildness of a legendary beast, but with the aching, human sorrow of a teenager who had watched his normal life get smudged like watercolor. He fell asleep exhausted, a teenager inside legend-sized fur, and dreamed of the cereal ad jingle, transformed into a taunt. He dreamed of N's voice. He dreamed of Luigi's eyes and Zekrom's crackling chuckle. When morning came, he hesitated to pry his lids open. After getting out of bed, Johnny shuffled to the mirror and braced himself for more white fur and deep blue eyes. Instead, he saw his own face. Human eyes. Human hair. The toothpaste cap in his hand looked right. The toothbrush fit in his fingers like it always had. The white fur was gone. The wings were gone. He laughed, a sudden, giddy, shaking sound. Relief rushed into him like a summer storm. He was Johnny the human again. When his friend from school knocked that afternoon and asked him to watch name that legendary, they seemed sheepish, like kids who had been part of scare. Johnny declined, saying, "I need a break from Pokémon." He didn't tell them about being chased by Master Balls or fighting a man who wanted a weaponized breakfast. He was tired from everything that had happened and just wanted some much-needed time alone. Johnny's friends respected his decision, curiosity mixed with guilt in their faces. Before they left, one of them announced that Legendary Loopies had been pulled from shelves and recalled. Team Galactic Foods project had been halted by the scandal of the plant attack and leaked internal files. Johnny's stomach flipped. It was a weird comfort to know that no one else would be tested and that no more children would be transformed without consent. That night, Johnny sat on the porch with dinner warming beside him. The stars were pinpricks of quiet approval. He thought about the week's absurdities while he had been a Reshiram one more time, like a montage. Such as the day he tried a random piece of rare candy he had found, which had been too fizzy and made his teeth sparkle. The time a gaggle of teenagers misfired a Master Ball that had landed on his tail, making Johnny run away scared. How the Wii Balance Board had declared him obese, which he hacked while giggling through tears. And the embarrassed store clerk who scanned a barcode on a giant TV while trying not to stare, and the way Johnny had broken his old TV and then gotten a bigger one that somehow felt like an apology to his old self. He also remembered the fear of being hunted, of losing his identity, of a company that treated children like test subjects. That shadow stayed with him like a lesson, that excitement and consumer culture can hide risks, and that sometimes you need to look past flashy ads and check the small print. As the porch light haloed his plate, Johnny felt strangely grateful. He had been a legend, literally, and come back to being a boy. He had friends who loved him even if they had panicked, and 2 legendary allies who would always watch. He imagined a future where he might find a way to help more, where the lessons of Team Galactic Foods would be used to teach others to ask questions and stand up for what was right. He put the spoon down, smiled at the quiet sky, and said aloud into the cool air, mostly to himself, "Okay, maybe I won't watch name that legendary tonight. I think I'll find some new show to enjoy." He laughed, the sound bright and human, and went inside. Somewhere, in the slow hum of the city, a note from N flickered. The old villain's promise, not a threat, but a promise of story left unfinished. Johnny felt his pulse quicken, not with panic, but with a strange, adventurous readiness. He had the taste of orange creamsicle still on his tongue, the memory of wings and electricity warm in his bones, and a life that now included knowing the language of legends. He set his plate aside and turned off the porch light. In the window, his reflection smiled back as a boy who had been, for a terrifying and magnificent week, a legendary, and who, for now, was content to be Johnny.
The highway hummed under Ashton's car tires on that fateful day in 2015, like a tired engine trying to remember its purpose. Night had settled warm and thick over the American town he lived in, the kind of summer heat that made the air feel slow and heavy. He had finished a long shift at the Pokémon Center, bandaging a stubborn Growlithe's paw, calming a jittery Togepi, restocking shelves with healing potions. And all he wanted was a bed and the quiet that came with sleep. The dashboard clock glowed 2:14 a.m., and the world outside his windshield was a smear of sodium streetlights and distant neon. His phone buzzed against the console. The name on the screen was unfamiliar, Norton. Ashton answered on instinct, tired and polite. The voice on the other end was smooth and oddly persuasive, a voice that knew how to make a favor sound like a necessity. Norton said Professor Sycamore had stopped answering calls at his private lab. Norton claimed to represent Stardo's Galaxy Research, a company with deep pockets and deeper patience. He said the lab housed a revolutionary project, research worth salvaging. He said Ashton was the closest Pokémon Center worker, and therefore the obvious choice to check the place out. When Norton hinted he could pull strings and cost Ashton his job if he refused, the choice narrowed. Ashton told himself he would be quick. He told himself he would be careful. He told himself he would be home before dawn. He did not know how literal Norton's promises would become. The lab sat half-hidden behind a stand of pines, its facade glass and steel, lights dark except for a single blinking security beacon. Norton's GPS coordinates led Ashton to a side entrance with a keypad and a sticker advertising a new app, PokéLab Decoder. Ashton installed the app on his phone and activated it, and the app unlocked the door with a soft chime. The air inside smelled of ozone and old coffee, of antiseptic and something sweeter, an undercurrent of chemicals and the faint metallic tang of machines that had been waiting. The lobby was a museum of halted ambition, display cases with prototype Pokeballs, a wall of framed patents, a projector looping a promotional reel of a smiling Professor Sycamore. Ashton's footsteps echoed. He felt watched by the silence. He told himself again to be quick. He moved deeper into the lab, phone flashlight cutting through the dark. The rooms grew larger, the corridors longer, as if the building had stretched while he wasn't looking. He found file cabinets, research logs, and then an empty cage with scorch marks on the floor. A whisper of movement made him freeze. He ducked into a locker and held his breath while a lone technician passed, muttering into a headset. The man's shadow fell across the locker door. Ashton's heart hammered against his ribs. The technician left and said, "Time for me to go home. I've been working too long." To himself, though Ashton, still hiding in the locker, heard him. Ashton exhaled and kept going. Ashton's world tilted in a way that had nothing to do with the building. He felt smaller, lighter, and then the phone in his hand seemed absurdly large. He laughed at himself, fatigue playing tricks, until he opened the camera app and the screen showed a face that was not his, a narrow snout, bright green eyes, a leafed tail curling behind a slender body. He was a Snivy. Panic came in waves. He fumbled with the phone, the touchscreen awkward under tiny, scaled fingers. He remembered Norton's offhand warning about strange effects, and realized with a cold clarity that he had been transformed the moment he crossed the lab threshold. He was not the only one. Voices echoed down a corridor, human voices but with a timbre that belonged to Pokémon. He followed them and found a Charizard in a cage, its wings folded, its eyes tired and human. The Charizard spoke in a voice that made Ashton's skin prickle. "Help me." "I am Professor Sycamore." The words were human, ragged with disbelief. Sycamore explained that Team Galactic, now operating under the alias Stardo's Galaxy Research, had come for his research. They had offered partnership, Then betrayal. A drink that looked like coffee had been a trap, a chemical brew that rewired flesh and bone. Sycamore had been turned into Charizard and imprisoned. Ashton, he said, had been changed too. Ashton's first instinct was disbelief, then anger, then a strange, practical calm. He had a mission: find the files Norton wanted and get out. He had a new body and new limitations. He had to adapt. The lab's innards were a maze of experiment rooms and storage bays. Ashton moved with a new kind of agility, slipping through vents and under tables. He was chased by a Pikachu that spoke in a sing-song voice and lashed out with sparks, its aggression inexplicable until Ashton realized the Pokémon could understand him now. His voice translated into cries and chirps by the strange physics of the transformation. He escaped by diving into a laundry chute and tumbling into a room that smelled of old paper and warm metal. There on a pedestal lay a device that made Ashton's breath catch. A Pokédata Master 1995, shaped like Reshiram and glowing with a soft, golden light. It hummed with stored knowledge, entries, schematics, encrypted files. He slipped it into his satchel. The device contained the missing research, coordinates, energy signatures, and a file labeled with a name that made his stomach drop: Legendary Project. He pocketed the Pokédata Master and moved to find Sycamore. The lab's corridors were a gallery of experiments gone wrong. Pokémon in cages, half-assembled mechanical limbs, a projector that played a looping image of a child's laughter. The deeper he went, the more he understood the scale of what had happened here. This was not a single betrayal, it was a program. Sycamore's cage was guarded by a single Team Galactic operative who had the arrogance of someone who believed in his own invulnerability. Ashton used his small size to his advantage. He darted between the guard's legs, tripped him with a well-placed tail flick, and the man went down in anger as he was knocked unconscious from the fall. Ashton snatched the keys and unlocked the cage. The Charizard that stepped out was not the professor's body so much as the professor's mind given a new, terrible form, still brilliant, still human in thought, but with the raw power of flame. Sycamore's gratitude was immediate and practical. He explained the Pokédata Master's true value. It contained the location of a newly discovered legendary Pokémon, a being whose energy could be harnessed as a city-scale power source. Sycamore had intended to use it for good, to end energy scarcity. Team Galactic had other plans. They wanted control. They wanted to weaponize the legend. Ashton and Sycamore moved through the lab together, a strange pair, a small, cunning Snivy and a towering Charizard with a professor's voice. They avoided patrols, navigated test chambers that smelled of ozone and fear, and pieced together the timeline of the invasion. Team Galactic had infiltrated under the Stardo's name, promising funding and legitimacy. When Sycamore refused to hand over his research, they gave him a drink called a triple-shot espresso fire roast, which he thought was just coffee, but found out too late after drinking it, transformed him, knocked him out, locked him up in a cage, and began harvesting data. They reached the lab's central atrium just as Norton stepped from the shadows. He wore a tailored suit and a smile that did not reach his eyes. He introduced himself as Norton, then let the mask slip. He was the architect of Team Galactic's new face. His voice was soft and certain, the kind of voice that believed in destiny and the rightness of its own cruelty. "You did well to come," N said. "You were useful. You've done everything you were told like a good little Pokémon, Ashton. Now give me the Pokédata Master 1995. N's men moved like a tide. Ashton fought with the instincts of a Snivy, quick strikes, clever feints, while Sycamore in Charizard form became a furnace of controlled fury. The Pokédata Master changed hands in a scuffle. It skittered across the floor and landed at N's feet. He picked it up as if holding a key. Ashton lunged. N struck him down with a gloved hand, and the device slipped into N's grasp. For a moment, defeat tasted like metal. Then Sycamore's eyes found a glowing stone on a shelf, a Charizardite. With a tail that trembled from effort and hope, Sycamore rolled the stone into the cage. The mega evolution was not a spectacle but a necessity. Sycamore became Charizard X, a storm of cobalt flame and renewed purpose. He broke free and unleashed a torrent of fire that scattered N's operatives. The battle turned. Ashton, still small and quick, darted between legs and claws, and together they forced N back. For a heartbeat, it seemed the night would end with the lab's liberation. N, however, was not a man who accepted defeat. He smiled, cold and certain, and triggered a self-destruct sequence. The lab's alarms began to wail. N fled like a shadow slipping through a crack, his escape a practiced choreography. He left behind chaos, sprinklers that sputtered uselessly, doors that sealed, corridors that began to buckle. The lab's infrastructure was failing. Ashton and Sycamore ran, the building groaning around them. Fire licked at insulation and wiring, turning corridors into ovens. Team Galactic's remaining guards scattered like frightened insects. A falling beam pinned Ashton beneath a tangle of metal. He called out, voice small and human in a body that was not. Sycamore, with the strength of a mega Charizard, lifted the debris and pulled Ashton free. They stumbled into the night as the lab collapsed behind them in a roar of flame and twisted steel. The sky was a smear of orange and ash. N's silhouette was already a memory, a dark shape disappearing toward a waiting jet. Outside, the world felt impossibly large and painfully small. The transformation that had bound them to the lab began to recede. The effects that had transformed Ashton and Sycamore into Pokémon were not permanent once they had escaped the lab's influence. As the first light of dawn bled into the horizon, they were human again, exhausted, singed, and alive. Professor Sycamore took the Pokédata Master 1995 into his care. He promised Ashton it would be secured, studied, and protected from those who would use it for harm. He thanked Ashton with a warmth that was both professional and deeply human. They stood on a rise and watched the lab smolder in the distance. For a moment, Ashton thought he saw a legendary figure on a nearby hill, a white, majestic shape that turned its head toward the moon and then took to the sky. Reshiram, or a memory of it, glided away, a silent witness to the night's violence. Sycamore warned that Team Galactic would return. N's escape was not a failure but a promise. The world had shifted, a new threat had learned where to look. Ashton felt the weight of that knowledge like a stone in his chest. He had been used, transformed, and nearly broken. He had also helped save a man and a piece of research that could change everything. When Ashton finally drove home, the road was empty and the air smelled of rain and ash. He parked, climbed the stairs to his small apartment, and collapsed into bed. Sleep came like a tide, deep, dreamless, and necessary. In the quiet, he wondered what tomorrow would bring. He thought of the Pokédata Master, of Sycamore's gratitude, of the silhouette of Reshiram against the moon. He thought of Norton's voice and N's smile, and the way the lab had felt alive with intent. Outside, the world turned. Inside, Ashton slept, exhausted and altered by what he had seen. The night had ended, but the story had not. Somewhere beyond the horizon, N plotted, and Team Galactic's shadow lengthened. The return of N was not a single event, but a slow, inevitable tide. Ashton had survived this night, but the future would demand vigilance, courage, and the kind of quiet resolve that comes from knowing you have faced something monstrous and lived to tell the tale. The dawn found him breathing steadily, the last embers of fear cooling in his chest. He would wake and go to work at the Pokémon Center, and the world would keep its ordinary rhythms. But the memory of the lab, the glow of the Pokédata Master, and the echo of a Legendary's wings would follow him like a promise. The fight was not over, and the return of N had only just begun. In 2017, high above Earth, a gleaming silver ring drifted silently through low orbit. This was Galactic Station, the newest and most ambitious creation of Team Galactic. Inside its polished halls, alarms pulsed with a soft blue glow as N, the former leader of Team Galactic, stood before the new commander, rocked him. He was a stern, sharp-eyed man who had defected from Team Rocket years earlier. N pleaded for one final chance. Twice he had failed to seize control of the world. Twice he had been stopped by unlikely heroes. But he insisted he could still lead Team Galactic to victory. Rocktum studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine. I'll give you one more chance," he said. "And you better make it count." N bowed, gathered a squad of galactic soldiers, and descended to Earth with a plan more ambitious and more dangerous than anything he had attempted before. A day later, in a quiet American neighborhood near Pallet Town, Johnny, now a young adult, relaxed in his living room. The TV flickered with breaking news. An entire town, the nearby Pallet Town, had been transformed into Pokémon. People were wandering the streets as Pikachu, Eevee, and Matchop. They were confused, frightened, and unable to speak. Johnny's heart dropped. He knew this pattern. He knew this villain. He walked to his old Nintendo DS, still holding his Pokémon black and white cartridge. He whispered, "Lugia. Zekrom. N is back." The DS glowed. Light burst from the screen, and Lugia and Zekrom emerged into the room, just as they had years ago. They confirmed Johnny's fear. N had returned, and this time he wasn't targeting a single region. He wanted the entire world. "We can't stop him alone," Lugia said. "We need allies." She opened her Poké-Tablet 26, scanning for humans who had survived N's past transformation schemes. 3 names appeared. First, there was Ashton, the Pokémon Center worker who survived Sycamore's lab incident. Then Professor Sycamore, brilliant and brave. And finally, Brocky, a gym leader who once fought Team Rocket and crossed paths with N long before anyone else. Johnny nodded. It was time to gather the team. Lugia and Zekrom combined their powers, transforming Johnny into Reshiram once more. With a mighty beat of his wings, he soared into the sky alongside his legendary partners. They found Ashton, Sycamore, and Brocky at Sycamore's lab. The reunion was emotional, especially when Ashton realized the mysterious Reshiram he once saw during his escape from Sycamore's lab had been Johnny all along. Sycamore handed Johnny a device he had invented. The Poké-Talker, allowing Pokémon to speak human language. Johnny's voice echoed clearly through the lab. "We stop N together." But before they could plan further, the ground shook violently. A massive earthquake rippled across the region. Sycamore's monitors lit up with seismic readings. "N and Team Galactic have stolen the fire sphere," Sycamore said. "They've awakened Groudon." The team flew to a distant volcanic island where Groudon rampaged, spewing fire and magma. The sky glowed red. The earth cracked beneath their feet. N appeared briefly, smirking as he escaped with his guards. Johnny and his allies fought fiercely to calm Groudon. Working together, Reshiram's flames, Lugia's calming winds, Zekrom's thunder, and Brocky's tactical skill. They restored the fire sphere to its resting place deep within the volcano. Groudon settled, returning to dormancy. But N was already gone. He had gone back to Galactic Station. The team pursued N into orbit, boarding Galactic Station just moments before N activated its central weapon. A planet-wide transformation laser. A green beam of shimmering energy shot toward Earth. Every human on the planet transformed into a Pokémon, obedient, mind-controlled, and unable to resist Team Galactic. Everyone except the 6 heroes who had boarded the station just in time. "You have 5 minutes. N taunted. After that, the transformation becomes permanent. The battle erupted across the station. Johnny, Lugia, Zekrom, Ashton, Sycamore, and Brocky fought through waves of galactic soldiers. Sparks flew. Metal groaned. The station trembled. At the last possible second, Sycamore reached the control room and fired a blue reversing beam back at Earth. A brilliant flash washed over the planet. Humanity returned to normal, with no memory of what had happened. N panicked. He tried to flee, but Rocktum appeared furious. "You failed me for the last time, N. Maybe you'll finally be useful to me now. No more running for you. Just hold still for a second and don't resist it. He activated Team Galactic's most powerful device, the Legendathon. The beam Rock'em shot out of the device struck N, transforming him into a legendary Pokémon capable of shifting between forms at will. He became Suicune, Rayquaza, Mewtwo, and more. With this new power, N overwhelmed the heroes one by one. Johnny and his allies collapsed, defeated. When they awoke, they were locked in cages. Rock'em stood proudly beside the transformed N. "You will all become starter Pokémon," Rock'em declared, "and I will trap you inside this Pokémon Black and White 3-game cartridge forever." But then, there was a ripple in space and a distortion in time. Palkia and Dialga suddenly appeared. With a single pulse of cosmic power, they shattered the cages and freed the heroes. N's transformation wore off. He was human again. Rock'em hadn't realized the Legendathon's effects were temporary. Desperate, Rock'em and N tried to escape. But there was nowhere left to run. The station began to collapse. Lights flickered. Gravity fluctuated. Johnny as Reshiram, Lugia, Zekrom, Sycamore, Ashton, Brocky, Palkia, and Dialga confronted Rock'em and N in the central chamber. Together, they formed a massive combined energy sphere. A swirling fusion of fire, water, electricity, psychic power, and cosmic force. Rock'em and N were struck, engulfed in light, and pulled into a pocket dimension, sealed away where they could never threaten Earth again. The station shook violently. It was falling out of orbit. "Get to the escape pods," Johnny shouted. They launched just in time. From a grassy hill on Earth, the heroes watched as Galactic Station crashed into the moon, exploding in a silent burst of silver and blue. Earth was safe. With the threat gone, Lugia and Zekrom gently transformed Johnny back into his human form. The world celebrated the fall of Team Galactic. Rock'em and N were gone forever, and the remaining Galactic members were arrested. Johnny thanked his legendary friends and his new allies, Ashton, Sycamore, and Brocky. Lugia and Zekrom returned to the Nintendo DS, offering Johnny a choice. "Stay with us," Zekrom said. "Live as Reshiram in the Pokémon world," added Lugia. "Protected from within." Johnny thought long and hard, and accepted. He stepped into the DS, becoming Reshiram once more, a guardian of the digital Pokémon world. Ashton decided to leave his Pokémon Center job and work full-time with Professor Sycamore, who took in Johnny's DS and kept it stored safe in his lab. And Ashton helped Sycamore ensure no one could ever misuse Pokémon transformation technology again. Brocky returned to his gym, wiser and stronger. And the world moved forward, safe at last. The saga of N had ended. But the legend of Johnny, the boy who became Reshiram, had only just begun. So next time you play a Pokémon game and see a Lugia, Zekrom, and Reshiram flying by in the video game, you can rest safe knowing they are protecting future generations from harm and threats. A year had passed since the world was saved from Team Galactic's final and most dangerous plan. Their leaders, N and Rock'em, had been sealed away in a pocket dimension where they could no longer harm anyone. Peace returned to Earth, and the world slowly forgot the terror that had nearly reshaped humanity. But one person remembered everything. Johnny, once an ordinary teenager who had then grown up into a young adult, had chosen a different path after the final battle. After accepting an offer from his legendary allies Lugia and Zekrom, he transformed into Reshiram permanently and stepped into the digital world of Pokémon games. There, he became a guardian alongside them, a protector of every Pokémon world, inside every cartridge and console. The real world moved on. But inside the games, a new adventure was about to begin. Spring sunlight warmed the sidewalks of Milford in 2018, an ordinary American town where Jimmy, a cheerful teenage 8th grader, stepped off the school bus for his first day of 8th grade at Westmouth Middle School. He chatted with friends, joked about homework, and walked into his math class expecting a normal day. Instead, the room buzzed with excitement. Everyone was talking about one thing: Pokémon Blazing Orange, a brand new game launching in a few weeks. Jimmy wasn't a huge Pokémon fan, but he had played a few games before. His classmates described the new region in the upcoming game. The Halton region, featuring real-time battles, new starters, amazing graphics and visuals, and a massive open world. It would also start the 11th generation of Pokémon games. Even the teacher, Mr. Hutt, had to quiet the class down twice. By the end of the day, Jimmy was curious enough to ask his parents if he could buy the game. They agreed, as long as he kept up his good grades. Jimmy proudly showed them his B+ on a recent assignment, and the deal was sealed. He would buy the game the day after launch. April 21st arrived with the energy of a massive video game launch. Jimmy and his friends met at the local game store to watch the launch event. Crowds cheered, screens flashed with gameplay, and the excitement was contagious. But Jimmy noticed something strange. On one of the demo screens, a Reshiram appeared, unmistakable and majestic, and glided across the footage for a split second. No one else saw it. His friends brushed it off as a glitch. The demo looped again, and the Reshiram did not appear. Jimmy shrugged it off, but the image stuck in his mind. The next day, Jimmy bought the Day 1 edition of Pokémon Blazing Orange. He rushed home, popped the cartridge into his family's Nintendo Switch console, and played for hours. The game was beautiful, fun, and glitch-free. He went to bed excited for Saturday. The next morning, he woke to a strange notification on his phone. Sightings reported. Please read. On PokéChat, located on a section of the website for the new game, players were posting about a mysterious Reshiram appearing in their copies of the game. Staring at them, following them, then vanishing. A developer replied saying Reshiram wasn't in the game at all, and was not one of the legendary Pokémon included in the game, and they were investigating the visual glitch. Jimmy remembered the demo screen. He remembered what he saw. But his friends hadn't seen anything in their copies, so he relaxed. Probably just a bug, he said to himself. That afternoon, he sat down to play again. Hours passed normally, until 4 p.m. Jimmy's mom called up that dinner would be ready in an hour. Jimmy paused the game, but the game unpaused itself. A Reshiram appeared on screen. It walked up to his player character. Jimmy grabbed his phone and snapped a picture for proof. Then the Reshiram destroyed his player character in a fiery blast of flame and turned its head. It looked directly at him, through the screen. Before Jimmy could react, the Reshiram reached out of the TV, grabbed him with a clawed arm, and pulled him straight into the game. Everything went black. Jimmy woke on soft grass under a bright orange sky. He felt heavier, taller, different. He stood up and realized he was eye to eye with the blue-eyed Reshiram who pulled him in. But if he was a human, why was he as tall as the Reshiram? He looked down. White fur, claws, wings. He was a Reshiram. Jimmy tried to scream, but a majestic howl came out instead. The other Reshiram chuckled warmly. Hey kid, it said in a human voice. You remind me of my old self. Same reaction and everything. Jimmy stared and then said in response, what? You can talk. The other Reshiram nodded and then said, name's Johnny. And yes, Pokémon understand each other perfectly, which is why you can talk to me, and vice versa. Whereas humans, on the other hand, just hear our voices as cries. Jimmy's mind raced. Why did you pull me in here? Johnny explained everything. He was once human. He now protected the digital Pokémon worlds. His allies, Lugia and Zekrom, were busy saving another Pokémon game. In the meantime, he needed a partner. Someone brave. Someone chosen. Jimmy was the one he had found. Jimmy worried about missing dinner, but Johnny reassured him, saying, "Time in the game world moves much faster. A few days here would be only an hour in real life." Jimmy breathed a sigh of relief. Johnny opened his Poké Tablet 26, which he was borrowing from Lugia, and scanned the game world. A threat appeared immediately. Team Plasma had taken over Violet City, blocking entrances, imprisoning NPCs, and trying to control the entire Halton region. Johnny spread his wings. "We have to fly there." Jimmy gulped. He was terrified of heights. Johnny quickly taught him how to flap his wings, how to glide, how to trust the air beneath him. Slowly, Jimmy lifted off the ground. His fear melted into awe. Together, the two Reshiram soared into the sunset. Violet City was in chaos. Team Plasma patrols marched through the streets, terminals blocked the gates, and frightened citizens hid in alleyways. Johnny moved with confidence, blasting grunts aside with controlled bursts of flame. Jimmy, still learning, stumbled through his first battles. But he held his own, surprising even himself. They freed prisoners, destroyed plasma terminals, and cornered the remaining grunts. "This isn't over," the grunts shouted as they fled. But Violet City was safe. That night the city celebrated. Lanterns glowed. Music played. Pokémon danced. Citizens offered food to their legendary heroes. Using the game's currency, Poké Dollars, via the city's food ordering app on the Poké Tablet 26, Johnny ordered a sparkling rare candy deep sea stew, reminiscent of what Lugia had cooked up for him in the past. Jimmy tried a black and white bash sundae, made up of special Pokémon edible ice cream, which was the best ice cream he had ever tasted, and way better than any ice cream he had eaten in the real world. They slept under the stars, full and happy. The next morning, Johnny and Jimmy flew back to the portal where Jimmy first arrived. The shimmering screen still showed Jimmy's bedroom, untouched. Before Jimmy stepped through, a new portal opened, and Lugia and Zekrom emerged. They congratulated Johnny on protecting the game and praised Jimmy for his bravery. "You did well, Johnny," Zekrom said. "And Jimmy, you're welcome in our worlds anytime," Lugia added. Jimmy stepped through the portal and transformed back into a human as he crossed into his room. He looked at the TV one last time. Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom waved goodbye from inside the game before flying off to protect another world. Jimmy checked the clock. It was 4:59 p.m. He made it back just in time for dinner. On Monday, Jimmy told his classmates everything at school. The portal, the transformation, the battles, the food, and the legends. No one believed him. Mr. Hutt chuckled and said Jimmy had a vivid imagination. Jimmy showed them the screenshot he had taken on his phone before being pulled in. One kid believed him, but the rest still doubted. Then a student burst into the classroom holding his Switch. "I saw them," he shouted. "Two Reshirams, flying toward Violet City while I was playing the game a few days ago." He showed the footage he recorded. The class gasped. Mr. Hutt's jaw dropped. Jimmy smiled. After the word had spread around the classes, his entire school, Westmouth Middle School, now knew the truth. The sighting stopped soon after. Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom had moved on to protect another Pokémon game. Jimmy wondered if he would ever see them again. He looked at his Pokémon blazing orange cartridge, now just a game on the surface. But he knew better. For a chosen few, the Pokémon worlds were more than pixels. They were portals. They were adventures. They were legends waiting to be lived. And Jimmy had become part of that legend. A new era had begun. May 15th, 2018, began like any other morning for Mr. Hutt, the well-liked math teacher at Westmouth Middle School. He arrived early, as he always did, unlocking his classroom at 7:45 a.m. and setting out worksheets for his 8th graders. The room was quiet, the fluorescent lights humming softly above him. But his mind wasn't on math. Instead, he found himself thinking about something he had not thought about in years. Pokémon Emerald version, the last Pokémon game he ever played back when he was 18 in 2005. He had caught every Pokémon in every game he had ever owned. Except one. One elusive creature in Emerald had slipped through his fingers, and after so many years, he could not even remember what it looked like. He shook his head. He was a teacher now. He did not play games anymore. The bell rang. It was now 8 a.m. Students poured in, including Jimmy, the boy who had recently claimed he had been pulled into a Pokémon game and turned into a Reshiram. The whole school had eventually believed him after another student showed proof. But Mr. Hutt was still not sure what to make of that. As class began, the students buzzed with excitement. Jimmy and his friends were talking non-stop about the newly announced Vibrant Emerald DLC for the Pokémon Blazing Orange video game. It's a remake of Emerald inside Blazing Orange. Jimmy said, and Rayquaza's gonna be in it. Another student added, we're racing to see who catches it first. Mr. Hutt sighed and told them to focus on their math test. But something about the name Rayquaza tugged at the back of his mind. After school had ended that evening, curiosity got the better of him. He slipped into the computer lab and typed Rayquaza into the search bar. But before he could hit enter, Jimmy walked in. Startled, Mr. Hutt slammed the computer off. Oh, hey Jimmy. I was just checking grades. He lied quickly. Jimmy asked about his test score, which Mr. Hutt said was a 92, and then Jimmy left with his parents. Mr. Hutt exhaled, embarrassed he had almost been caught looking up a kid's game. He went home exhausted and fell asleep. That night he dreamed he woke up in his bedroom at 5:17 a.m. The room looked exactly as it always did, except for a shadow that darted past his window. He approached the glass. Nothing. He turned back toward his bed. Crash! A massive green silhouette smashed through the window, shattering glass everywhere. Mr. Hutt jolted awake, heart pounding, realizing it had only been a nightmare. The digital clock next to his bed glowed 1:15 a.m. in red numbers. He tried to shake the image from his mind and went back to sleep. The next morning, May 16th, just before leaving for school, he opened his closet and froze. There, untouched for years, sat his Game Boy Advance and his Pokémon Emerald cartridge. He held them in his hands, remembering the hours he had spent trying to catch that one last Pokémon. He almost turned the console on, but stopped himself. I'm an adult, Mr. Hutt muttered. I don't play games anymore. But the thought lingered. At school, during lunch in the cafeteria, the students were even more excited about the DLC releasing the next day. Mr. Hutt overheard Jimmy mention to his friends that the DLC's sky would glow emerald green, just like in the original Emerald game. Mr. Hutt felt a chill. That was the exact color of the sky in his nightmare. That night, he went to bed early. At 1 a.m. on May 17th, a loud beep echoed from his closet. His Game Boy Advance had turned on by itself. The screen flickered with static, then displayed a message. Go to the school's computer lab. I will be waiting. Mr. Hutt's stomach dropped, but something compelled him to go. He drove to Westmouth Middle School in the middle of the night, unlocked the side door, and walked through the dark hallways. The computer lab lights flickered. One computer was on, glitching violently. A green serpentine Pokémon appeared on the screen. It was long, coiling, and had glowing yellow eyes. Before he could react, the creature's head pushed out of the monitor like it was made of liquid light. It lunged and consumed him. Everything went black. Mr. Hutt woke up lying on soft grass. He felt heavy, exhausted, and unable to move. Above him stretched a shimmering emerald sky filled with glowing green stars. He thought he was dreaming again. Then he saw 3 legendary Pokémon flying overhead. Reshiram, Lugia, and Zekrom, before drifting back into sleep. When he woke again, sunlight warmed his scales. Scales. Kids approached him. Jimmy's player character, and the player characters of his friends inside the DLC playing with him. Mr. Hutt could see the usernames above their heads, and realized they were some of the students from his class playing the game's DLC. "Look, it's Rayquaza," said Jimmy's character. "Let's see who catches it first," the character of one of Jimmy's friends excitedly replied. Mr. Hutt tried to shout, "I'm not a Pokémon," but only a deep roar came out. A Master Ball flew toward him. Click. Darkness. He had been caught. Inside the Master Ball, he felt strangely energized. He looked down at himself. Long green coils. Golden patterns. Claws. Fangs. He was Rayquaza, the one Pokémon he had never caught in Emerald. And now he was the one who had been caught. But then, clatter. Jimmy's friend dropped the Master Ball, exclaiming, "Aw, looks like I had butterfingers." It rolled down a hill, hit a rock, and popped open. Mr. Hutt burst out, terrified, and flew away from the approaching Jimmy and his friends before they could capture him again. He soon discovered sunlight recharged him, explaining why he had been so weak at night. He tried visiting cities for help, but NPCs screamed and ran from him. He couldn't speak human words. He was alone. That night, he curled up on a cliff and cried himself to sleep. The next morning, something heavy sat on his nose. A Reshiram. "Wake up, Mr. Hutt," it said calmly. Mr. Hutt yelped. "Ouch! Why did you pinch me?" Johnny stepped back and smiled. "Just making sure you were awake." Johnny explained everything. He knew Mr. Hutt from Jimmy's adventure. He had not brought Mr. Hutt into the game's DLC. Something else, or someone else, had. He would try to help, along with Lugia and Zekrom. Johnny flew off, leaving Mr. Hutt with a sliver of hope. Mr. Hutt flew to Driftvale City, hoping someone there could help. A strange man in odd clothing approached him. "I can understand you, using this translation device I've invented." "Ingenious, right?" the man said. "Follow me." Relieved, Mr. Hutt did. But it was a trap. A net dropped over him. Team Plasma soldiers rushed in. The strange man stepped forward, smirking. "My name is N, the new leader of Team Plasma," he said. "And you are exactly what I need." Mr. Hutt's vision blurred as he was dragged away. He woke in a cage inside a high-tech lab. Machines hummed around him. Tubes glowed with green energy. N stood before him. "I escaped the pocket dimension." N said, "But I cannot return to the real world without power." "Your power?" He explained that the Rayquaza that had attacked Mr. Hutt through the computer in the school was a digital hologram designed to pull him into the game's DLC. N planned to drain Rayquaza's legendary energy to open a portal back to Earth, bringing Team Plasma with him. Mr. Hutt roared in anger, but the cage held firm. The machines began to hum louder. His energy was being drained. Suddenly, boom, the wall exploded inward. Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom stormed into the lab. "Found him, thanks to his legendary energy signature that I picked up on my Poképad 27. Zekrom shouted. Johnny blasted the machines with fire, freeing Mr. Hutt and restoring his stolen energy. Lugia and Zekrom fought off Team Plasma soldiers. N snarled, "You cannot stop me." But together, the 4 Legendaries overwhelmed him. N and his soldiers fled, vowing revenge. Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom destroyed the lab completely, so it could never be used again. Mr. Hutt, trembling but relieved, thanked them. How do I get back? Mr. Hood asked. Johnny opened his Poké Tablet 28. We can reopen the portal through the same computer you came from. Lugia added, don't worry. Only 2 hours have passed in the real world. Zekrom nodded. It's still the same night. They opened a shimmering portal. Through it, Mr. Hutt saw the dark school computer lab. He stepped through. His body shifted back into human form. Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom waved from the other side before the portal closed. The clock in the computer lab said it was 3 a.m. 2 hours really had only passed. A Pokeball-shaped sticky note appeared on the computer screen. Mr. Hutt peeled it off. Note for Mr. Hutt. Better catch that Rayquaza in your Emerald game. And maybe let your students talk about Pokemon sometimes. From Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom. Mr. Hutt laughed softly. He went home and finally slept peacefully. The next day, May 18th, Mr. Hutt brought his old Game Boy Advance to class. Today, he said, we're doing something different. He let the students play Pokemon games during free time. And their grades actually improved from the extra motivation. At lunch, he proudly showed them his completed Pokemon Emerald Pokédex, including Rayquaza, which he finally caught that morning. The students were shocked. Jimmy smiled knowingly. Mr. Hutt didn't tell them what happened. But he did say, I'll never look at Rayquaza the same way again. The class laughed. And for the first time, Mr. Hutt felt closer to his students than ever before. June 12, 2018, was a scorcher in the real world. At Westmouth Middle School, students like Jimmy lounged inside classrooms with melting ice cream cups, while teachers, including Mr. Hutt, ran around the playground laughing, tossing water balloons and spraying water guns as part of the school's annual day of summer fun. But inside the digital worlds of the Pokemon video games, the atmosphere was very different. Deep within Team Plasma's massive headquarters, a cold metallic hum filled the air. N, the former leader of Team Galactic, and now the reluctant servant of Team Plasma, stepped into the main chamber. There, waiting for him, was a man cloaked in shadows. A man known only as G. N bowed. So you wanted me for something. G smiled thinly. Indeed. And I have good news. Your failures were not failures at all. N blinked. What do you mean? G stepped forward, eyes gleaming. Every attempt you made. The mind control serial. The escape from the digital world. The Rayquaza energy siphon. All of it gave me data. Valuable data. And now the first 2 phases of my grand plan are complete. N swallowed. So what is phase 3? G chuckled. A surprise. But before I begin, I need one final piece of information. Data on the 3 legendary Pokemon who keep ruining our plans. N stiffened. That bothersome Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom. Exactly. G said. To gather that data, you must get close to them. And to do that, you must become one of them. He revealed a transformation machine. A towering device crackling with purple electricity. Today, G said, you will become Shadow Lugia. N hesitated. And then, G whispered, you will spend the day with them. Learn their strengths, their weaknesses, their habits, their allies. Bring me everything. Before N could protest, the machine roared to life. A flash of blinding light filled the chamber. And N was no longer human. He was Shadow Lugia. Dark feathers, glowing red eyes, and a powerful aura that radiated corruption and mystery. G waved him off. Go, find them, and do not fail me this time. Shadow Lugia spread his wings and flew into the digital sky. Meanwhile, far from Team Plasma's base, 3 legendary Pokémon soared above a peaceful digital landscape. Johnny the Reshiram, Lugia, and Zekrom. They had just saved their 500th digital world, a milestone that left them proud and exhausted. The 3 legendaries landed and sat on a grassy hill. Johnny stretched his wings. "We need a break." Zekrom nodded. "A full day off. No rescues. No emergencies." Lugia checked her Poké-tablet 26, scanning for danger. "All clear. No threats. No distress signals. We're free." They smiled at each other. A day off. Finally. But before they could decide where to go, a shadow passed overhead. A shadow Lugia landed nearby. "Hello," he said smoothly. "I heard you 3 were taking a day off. Mind if I join you?" Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom exchanged glances. He seemed friendly enough, and another legendary joining them sounded fun. "Sure, the more the merrier," Johnny said. Shadow Lugia smiled, though deep down, guilt flickered for a moment. The 4 legendaries voted on where to go first. Lugia, Laguna Lake. Johnny, Laguna Lake. Zekrom, Laguna Lake. Shadow Lugia, Pokémon Park. The vote was 3-1. Laguna Lake it was. The lake shimmered like liquid crystal. Sandy beaches sparkled under the digital sun. A family of Lapras glided across the water, singing soft melodies. Johnny and Zekrom built a giant Poké Center-shaped sandcastle, laughing as Zekrom accidentally zapped the sand into glassy sculptures. Lugia and Shadow Lugia dived underwater, weaving between coral reefs and schools of love disc. After resurfacing, they discovered a tiny, shell-shaped island at the center of the lake's surface that was ruled entirely by Squirtles, who waved at them proudly from their miniature kingdom. After an hour of swimming, building, and exploring, the 4 legendaries dried off and headed to their next destination. Pokémon Park was alive with color, music, and the smell of carnival food. Johnny tried cotton candy, but it wasn't Pokémon edible, so he spat it out dramatically. Shadow Lugia burst into laughter. The vendor apologized and handed Johnny a Pokémon-safe cotton candy, which Johnny devoured happily. Next came the roller coaster, a twisting, looping ride that nearly flung Zekrom off during a sharp turn. "The park should probably make that safer," Lugia said, clinging to her seat. Then they played a basketball hoop game. Lugia sank shot after shot, winning a giant Rayquaza plush. Johnny clapped. "You're amazing." Shadow Lugia felt a strange warmth in his chest. He wasn't supposed to enjoy this. He wasn't supposed to like them. But he did. Next came Pokémon Go, kart racing. Johnny won first place. Zekrom came second. Shadow Lugia third. And Lugia fourth. But she laughed the whole time. Trainers approached them for autographs on Ultra Balls and Pokeballs. "We're so glad you protect our worlds," one trainer said. Shadow Lugia felt another pang of guilt. He was here to betray them. But they were so kind. Inside the park's arcade, neon lights flashed and machines beeped. Each legendary picked a game. Lugia played Pikachu Jumper. She timed her jumps perfectly, avoiding electric shocks. Score: 1996. Prize: 50 tickets. Johnny played Pick That Legend. He assembled a story about a boy who becomes a legendary hero. It sounded suspiciously like his own life. Prize: 35 tickets. Shadow Lugia played Survive the Night. He checked cameras, closed doors, and avoided animatronic Nidoking, Fennekin, and Charmander. Despite running out of power in the game and seeing Nidoking's glowing eyes in his doorway while creepy music played, and he realized he was probably about to lose, he held out to the very end and managed to survive until 6 a.m. Prize: 1987 tickets. He pretended to swim in the tickets, making the others laugh. And Zekrom played the Galaxy Invader. He blasted enemy ships and destroyed a massive galactic space station boss. Prize: 175 tickets. Together, they earned 2,247 tickets. They bought 4 Pokewalkers, each one costing 500 tickets, which were Reshiram, Lugia, Zekrom, and Shadow Lugia themed. They also purchased 4 glow-in-the-dark gold tokens using their remaining tickets, with the words, "I visited Pokemon Park," etched on each token. Their stomachs rumbled. Time for food. At the park's Hunger Hut concession stand, Zekrom ordered a Pokemon edible triple fudge Comet Swirl milkshake, small fries, and a midnight black cheeseburger. Lugia ordered a Pokemon edible double crispy fish and cheese sandwich, medium fries, and a sparkling sea water drink. Shadow Lugia ordered a Pokemon edible double cheeseburger with no pickles, tomatoes, lettuce, or onions, large mozzarella sticks with red dipping sauce, and a dark cola with no ice. Johnny teased him. "Why order a burger with nothing on it?" Shadow Lugia shrugged. "I like it simple." And Johnny ordered a Pokemon edible Hawaiian pizza slice, 3 extra-large legendary-size Bosco sticks with red dipping sauce, and a limited-edition fiery red Reshiram popsicle, which had the wrong eye color printed on it. Johnny complained the eye color should have been blue like a real Reshiram's eyes like the package showed, not green on the actual popsicle, and the others joked and said his popsicle must have had a manufacturing defect. They laughed, ate, and planned their next stop. They decided to visit iconic locations from each Legendary's original game. Lugia's Origin, Whirlpool Islands, from Pokemon Soul Silver version. They soared above swirling whirlpools and jagged cliffs. The water sparkled like diamonds. Shadow Lugia whispered, "Beautiful." Zekrom's Origin, Sky Arrow Bridge, from Pokemon White version. A massive bridge stretched across the horizon. Trainers and Pokemon walked below like tiny dots. Johnny gasped, "It's incredible." Shadow Lugia's Origin, Unknown. When asked where he came from, Shadow Lugia froze. He didn't know enough about Shadow Lugia's lore. "Oh, some Colosseum game," he said vaguely. "Don't remember the locations." Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom exchanged confused looks. But let it slide. Lugia then did a cooking demo at the Lumino City Pokémon Center. She demonstrated how to make her famous deep-sea stew, using a translation device so humans could understand her. Trainers took notes. Johnny and Zekrom watched in awe. Shadow Lugia sneaked a second bowl when no one was looking. He felt guilty again. He liked these 3. He admired them. But he had a mission. Their final stop was Diamond Lake, a peaceful place where the sunset painted the sky in gold and pink. The 4 Legendaries lay side by side, watching the sun dip below the horizon. A brilliant blue comet streaked across the sky. Shadow Lugia's transformation began to flicker. He stood up. "I have to go. Another world needs me." Johnny nodded. "You should continue doing a good job out there." Lugia smiled. "We had a great time with you." Zekrom waved. "Come hang out again someday." Shadow Lugia hesitated, and then flew off quickly before they could see the guilt in his eyes. Johnny watched him disappear. "Strange guy," he murmured. "But fun." The trio looked through the photos they had taken throughout the day, laughing at the memories. They agreed. They needed more days off like this. Then they flew home to rest. Back at Team Plasma headquarters, Shadow Lugia landed just as the transformation wore off. N, now human again, stumbled inside, exhausted but strangely emotional. G, now revealing his full name, Getsus, approached him. "Well," He demanded, and handed him the plasma data gatherer, filled with information about Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom. Ghetsis smiled. For once, you did not fail. He turned away, already analyzing the data. This, he said, is the final piece I needed. Phase 3 begins soon. N hesitated. Ghetsis, can I trust you? Ghetsis did not answer. N walked away, unsure of his future. And unsure of himself. Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom slept peacefully, unaware that their relaxing day off had unknowingly given their greatest enemy exactly what he needed. But for now, the trio had their memories, their laughter, their friendship, and the digital worlds remained safe. At least for today.